She was never quiet because she had nothing to say. She was quiet because she learned very early in life that speaking at the wrong moment could cost her safety. And then, with age, something changed. Her voice stopped carrying fear and began carrying truth. Her voice had always existed. It had simply been waiting for permission. Not from others, from herself. As a child, she learned to read rooms before she learned to trust her thoughts. She noticed who spoke freely, who was interrupted, and who faded into the background. More often than not, she belonged to the last group. She asked questions carefully. She shared ideas halfway. She ended her sentences with reassurance instead of certainty. It's okay. It doesn't really matter. Never mind. People described her as polite, easygoing, adaptable. She accepted those labels gratefully because losing them felt more frightening than losing her own voice. In her younger years, life moved quickly. Education, work, relationships, responsibilities stacked on top of each other, leaving little space for reflection. She learned efficiency. She learned compromise. She learned how to keep things moving. Her voice adjusted accordingly. She spoke to resolve issues, to meet deadlines, to smooth tension, rarely to express what she actually felt. Truth felt optional. Functionality felt necessary. In meetings, she arrived prepared, notes organized, thoughts clear. But when she began to speak, someone often spoke over her. Not aggressively, casually. Someone finished her sentence incorrectly. Someone redirected the conversation. She noticed. She paused. She let it go. Adaptation became instinct. She shortened her points. She abandoned ideas mid-sentence. She told herself she would speak later. Later rarely came. This wasn't silence born from fear. It was silence born from habit. Over time, she stopped noticing how much space she was giving away. Space surrendered quietly is only missed when you finally need it. Change did not arrive through a dramatic moment. It arrived through accumulation. Years of listening. Years of observing the same patterns repeat. Years of watching louder voices dominate conversations. Not because they were wiser, but because they were unafraid to occupy space. That realization stayed with her. Not as resentment, as curiosity. With age came something unexpected. She stopped rushing her thoughts. She no longer felt compelled to respond immediately. Silence stopped feeling dangerous. She learned that pauses carry authority. When she paused before speaking, people noticed. Not because she demanded attention, but because she didn't rush to fill the space. Her sentences slowed. They became measured, intentional. She stopped leading with disclaimers. No more, I could be wrong. No more, this might not matter. If something mattered to her, it mattered. Her voice did not grow louder. It grew steadier. Steadiness communicates confidence more effectively than volume ever could. She had lived enough life to trust her instincts. She had seen outcomes unfold, promises break, patterns repeat themselves with alarming consistency. Experience refined her perspective. Now, when she spoke, it wasn't to prove intelligence. It was to offer understanding. Understanding does not compete. It stands. Some people noticed the change immediately. They listened differently. They interrupted less. They asked fewer clarifying questions. Others felt unsettled. They mistook her calm for stubbornness, her clarity for distance. She did not rush to explain. Explanation had once been her shield. Now it felt unnecessary. She understood something deeply. Not everyone deserves access to your inner certainty. Her voice no longer existed to make rooms comfortable. It existed to speak truthfully. At work, meetings shifted. She spoke less frequently, but when she did, the room paused. Pauses are a form of respect. Her words carried context, not just information, experience. She noticed younger women watching her. They weren't copying her language. They were observing her pacing. She did not mentor loudly. She modeled quietly. Her presence communicated something powerful. You do not need permission to take space. She remembered her younger self, the one who rehearsed sentences internally, the one who waited for validation before continuing. She felt compassion. That version of herself had done what she needed to survive. This version was ready to live. Age had not made her invisible. It had removed performance. She no longer measured herself by reaction. Her voice had grown steady. Now life wanted to know if she would stand by it when it mattered. Strength is easy when it's untested. What changes a life is the moment it's questioned. The challenge did not arrive loudly. It arrived disguised as responsibility, a decision she could no longer postpone, a moment where silence would be easier, and speaking would cost her something. Earlier in her life, she would have prepared explanations, careful ones, softened ones. Now she prepared only for honesty. The request came in a familiar way, reasonable, polite, wrapped in expectation. It asked for her time, her flexibility, her willingness to adjust. Again. Saying yes would have kept everything smooth, no disruption, no discomfort. But saying yes would have meant stepping away from something she had finally claimed, her own authority. She felt the pause before responding, not fear, awareness that this moment mattered. She listened inwardly before answering, not to doubt herself, but to confirm alignment. When she spoke, her voice did not shake. She said no. The word landed quietly, but it changed the room. There was a pause. Longer than usual, someone asked for clarification, not harshly, curiously. The old reflex stirred, explain, justify, reassure. She felt it rise, and then she stopped. She repeated her decision. Nothing more. Silence followed. Silence reveals more than words ever do. Some people shifted in their seats. Some looked surprised, some disappointed. No one argued. That surprised her. She realized then how often she had expected resistance simply because she was used to defending herself. Defending had once been automatic. Now it felt unnecessary. The conversation moved on. Not comfortably, but forward. Later that day, she noticed something unexpected. She felt calm. No replaying the moment. No rehearsing alternative responses. Her body trusted the decision before her mind did. That night, she slept deeply. In the days that followed, the reactions came quietly. Some people became distant, not angry, just unsure. They were adjusting to a version of her they had not interacted with before. She let them adjust. Adjustment is not rejection. It's recalibration. At work, the shift was subtle but real. She spoke less frequently, but when she did, her words were received differently. They were not debated immediately. They were considered. She noticed something important. Clarity invites respect even from those who don't agree. In meetings, interruptions decreased, not because people became kinder, but because her presence became firmer. Firm does not mean aggressive. Firm means grounded. Grounded voices are difficult to dismiss. She also noticed who struggled most with the change, those who were used to her flexibility, those who relied on her willingness to adjust. Their discomfort was not her responsibility. That realization did not harden her. It freed her. In her personal life, the change was more intimate. She declined invitations without over-explaining. She chose rest without apology. Some friends understood immediately. They adjusted their expectations. Others questioned her distance. She listened, but she did not retreat. Distance, she learned, is not the same as disconnection. Sometimes it is respect for limits. There were moments of loneliness. She did not deny them. Loneliness is not failure. It is transition. Transition between who you were and who you are becoming. She allowed herself to feel it without rushing to fix it. Fixing had once been her instinct. Now she allowed. She began to notice how much energy she had once spent managing perceptions. How many choices were shaped by anticipation rather than truth. That energy was returning to her. She used it intentionally. She read more, walked slower, listened more deeply. She noticed her internal responses with greater clarity. When something felt wrong, she paused. When something felt right, she acted. She no longer negotiated with herself endlessly. That inner negotiation had once kept her small. Now, it felt unnecessary. One conversation stood out. Someone asked her directly if she had changed. She considered the question, then answered simply. She hadn't changed. She had stopped compensating. That distinction mattered. Compensation had once protected her. Now, it limited her. She noticed how her stronger voice did not push others away. It filtered them. Those who valued her clarity stayed present. Those who needed her compliance drifted. Drifting was not dramatic. It was natural. She did not chase reassurance. She did not explain herself back into comfort. Comfort, she realized, had once come at the cost of truth. Truth now felt steadier than comfort ever had. She trusted that respect grows where consistency exists. Consistency became her anchor. She showed up the same way, calm, clear, intentional. Over time, resistance softened. Not everyone approved, but approval was no longer her compass. Alignment was. Her voice had moved beyond expression. It had entered decision, and life responded, not with applause, but with space. Space to stand, space to choose, space to remain whole. She sensed that this was only the beginning, because the next challenge would not come from others' expectations. It would come from vulnerability, from the need to stay open without becoming small again. And how she handled that would determine what her stronger voice truly meant. Her voice had learned how to stand firm. Now it had to learn something harder. How to stay open without becoming small again. Strength is visible in decisions, but vulnerability reveals itself in relationships. This part of her journey did not arrive with confrontation. It arrived quietly, through closeness. Someone in her life wanted more of her, not more words, more access. Earlier versions of herself would have welcomed that request immediately. She would have adjusted. She would have reassured. Now she paused. The pause did not mean rejection. It meant awareness. She realized something important. Having a stronger voice did not mean closing herself off, but it also did not mean offering herself without limits. This balance was new. She had spent years confusing openness with availability, confusing care with compliance. Now she was learning a different language. In conversations that mattered, she stayed present. She listened fully. She responded honestly, but she no longer over-explained her inner world. Explanation had once been her way of staying safe. Now, safety came from discernment. She noticed how vulnerability felt different than before. Earlier, vulnerability had meant exposure. Now it meant choice. Choice about what to share, choice about when to speak, choice about what deserved silence. Silence, she learned, could be intimate without being distant. There were moments when the other person misunderstood her restraint. They asked if something was wrong. She didn't rush to reassure, not because she didn't care, but because reassurance without truth creates confusion. Instead, she spoke simply. She shared how much quiet mattered to her, how reflection helped her remain present, how space allowed her to return grounded, not depleted. She did not justify these needs, she stated them. The response was not immediate. Understanding rarely is. There was discomfort, not hostility. Adjustment. Adjustment is where growth happens. She allowed the discomfort to exist. Earlier, she would have rushed to fix it. Now she trusted the process. Trusting the process required patience. Patience had not always been her strength. She had once believed that relationships needed constant tending to survive, constant reassurance, constant availability. Now she understood something different. Healthy connections breathe. They expand. They contract. They respect rhythm. Her rhythm had changed. She noticed how intimacy deepened when it slowed down. Less performance, more presence. She no longer felt the need to be understood immediately. Understanding that lasts takes time. She began to see how her stronger voice influenced closeness. It filtered intention. Those who valued her depth stayed engaged. Those who required constant access grew uneasy. Uneasiness was not her failure. She had spent years absorbing others' discomfort. Now, she allowed it to remain where it belonged. This did not make her colder. It made her clearer. Clear boundaries allowed genuine warmth to exist. She noticed how her emotional responses changed. She no longer rushed to defend her feelings. She acknowledged them quietly. Feelings did not need explanation either. They needed space. She gave herself that space. In moments of closeness, she spoke from experience rather than reaction. She shared stories instead of justifications, truth instead of defense. Truth landed differently. It did not provoke debate. It invited reflection. She felt something settle inside her. Not confidence, stability. Stability does not rush connection. It allows it. She noticed how often in the past she had overshared to prevent misunderstanding. Oversharing had been another form of self-protection. Now she trusted that being partially known was still being known. Total transparency is not intimacy. Respect is. She allowed people to meet her where she stood, not where they wanted her to be. This shift did not isolate her. It refined her connections. Some relationships became quieter, but deeper. Others remained polite, but distant. Distance, she learned, is not always loss. Sometimes it is alignment. There were moments when vulnerability felt risky, moments when sharing her inner truth could invite pressure. In those moments, she chose restraint.
Educadores
Restraint was
e
not
pais de
fear.
alunos.
It was wisdom. Wisdom knows that not every feeling needs an audience. She also noticed something else. Her stronger voice did not dominate conversations. It softened them. People spoke more thoughtfully around her, listened longer, interrupted less. Her calm invited calm. She had become someone others felt safe being honest with. That realization surprised her. For so long, she had believed that being strong meant standing alone. Now she understood that strength could hold connection without dissolving itself. She trusted herself not to disappear inside closeness. That trust was new. It allowed her to remain open without fear. Fear had once shaped her voice. Now, trust shaped it. As she moved through this phase, she sensed something ahead. Another test. Not one of confrontation, not one of closeness, but one that would require her to choose herself fully without explanation. That choice would not be witnessed by many, but it would define everything. And when the moment arrived, she would learn whether her stronger voice could stand firm even in solitude. Her voice had learned how to connect. Now it faced its quietest test, standing alone with a decision no one else would fully understand. Not every turning point arrives with witnesses. Some arrive in silence, asking only one thing: honesty. The decision did not come suddenly. It had been forming quietly, layer by layer through months of reflection. It involved letting go, not of people, but of a version of her life that no longer fit. Earlier in her life, she would have delayed this moment. She would have consulted others, collected opinions, searched for reassurance. Now she paused, but she did not seek permission. The question was simple. The answer was not. Staying would be familiar, predictable, safe in appearance. Leaving, or choosing differently, would disrupt routines. Disruption once terrified her. Now it felt honest. She noticed how her body responded when she imagined staying. A quiet heaviness, a subtle resistance. When she imagined choosing herself, there was fear, but also relief. Relief mattered. She realized something essential. Fear often accompanies truth. Comfort often accompanies compromise. She had spent years choosing comfort at the expense of alignment. This time, she chose alignment. The decision did not require a speech. It required resolve. She informed the people involved calmly, respectfully. No long explanations, no emotional defense. Her voice remained steady. Some responded with surprise, others with concern. A few questioned her timing. She listened, but she did not waver. She understood now that disagreement does not invalidate clarity. After the conversations ended, she was alone. Alone with the consequences. Alone with the quiet. The quiet did not accuse her. It held her. She noticed how different this felt from past decisions. Earlier, she would have replayed conversations endlessly, wondered if she had hurt someone, questioned her judgment. Now, there was still doubt. but it did not control her. Doubt had lost its authority. She trusted herself to navigate uncertainty. Trust does not remove fear. It gives you something steadier than fear. Time passed. Not dramatically, ordinarily. Life adjusted. Schedules changed, expectations shifted. Some people faded gently from her daily life. She allowed it. Clinging had once felt necessary. Now release felt natural. She noticed how much energy returned to her. Energy once spent managing reactions, explaining choices, soothing discomfort. That energy became presence. She became more attentive to her own rhythms. She rested when tired, spoke when moved, stayed silent when silence felt right. Her voice guided her days without effort. There were moments of grief. She acknowledged them. Grief does not mean regret. It means you cared. She allowed grief to pass without turning it into self-doubt. That was new. She also noticed moments of joy. Small ones. A morning without urgency. An afternoon walk without distraction. A conversation that felt equal. Equality felt different now, not something she asked for, something she embodied. Her stronger voice had shifted how she occupied space. She did not fill rooms. She grounded them. People responded accordingly. Some approached her differently, with respect rather than expectation. Others kept their distance. Distance did not wound her anymore. She understood that not everyone can stay close when you stop shrinking. She didn't explain this to anyone. She didn't need to. Her life had begun to feel intentional, not perfect, not easy, honest. Honesty simplified things. She no longer needed to prove her strength. She lived it. As weeks turned into months, she sensed another realization settling in. This decision had not isolated her. It had aligned her. Alignment creates space. Space for relationships that meet you fully. Space for work that respects your limits. Space for a life that does not demand explanation. She realized that her voice, stronger now than ever, had done its work quietly. It had guided her without force. It had protected her without walls. It had allowed her to stand alone without loneliness. And as she stood there, in a life reshaped by one honest decision, she knew something important. The final lesson was not about speaking, it was about belonging to herself. And that realization would soon ask her to step fully into who she had become, without hesitation, without apology. Her voice no longer asked for space. It simply stood where it belonged. And life, finally, adjusted around her. The quiet that followed her decision was different, not heavy, not uncertain, familiar. She woke up one morning and realized she was no longer bracing herself for the day. No rehearsed conversations, no emotional armor, no internal negotiation. Her life felt simpler. Not because it had fewer responsibilities, but because it carried less resistance. She noticed it in small moments, how her shoulders rested naturally, how her breath slowed without effort, how her thoughts arrived without urgency. Peace had stopped feeling temporary. It felt earned. She no longer measured days by productivity alone. She measured them by alignment. Did her actions reflect her values? Did her choices respect her limits? Most days, the answer was yes. She realized something important. Her stronger voice was no longer something she used. It was something she lived. Conversations changed, not dramatically, subtly. She spoke with ease. She listened without anticipation. She responded without defensiveness. When she disagreed, she did not tense. Disagreement no longer threatened her sense of self. She allowed others to have their perspectives without absorbing them as responsibility. Responsibility, she learned, ends where self-betrayal begins. Some relationships transformed. They became quieter, more honest, less performative. She no longer felt the need to be constantly understood. Being respected felt enough. Other relationships faded naturally, not through conflict, through misalignment. She did not grieve them the way she once would have. She understood now that endings are not failures. They are conclusions. Her life began to feel intentional. Morning routines softened. Evenings felt unhurried. She noticed how much she enjoyed her own company, not as an escape, as a grounding. Solitude no longer felt like absence. It felt like space. Space to think, space to feel, space to exist without explanation. She became more selective with her energy, not guarded, intentional. When she said yes, it came from willingness. When she said no, it came from clarity. Neither required justification. Her body responded to this consistency. She slept better, moved more gently, recovered more quickly from stress. The nervous system recognizes truth before the mind does. She felt compassion for her past self, the version that over-explained, over-accommodated, over-gave. That version had been trying to stay safe. She did not judge her. She thanked her. Survival had carried her here. Now she was living. She noticed how people interacted with her differently, not with hesitation, with presence. They spoke more thoughtfully, listened more fully. Her calm had become contagious. She did not dominate rooms. She anchored them. She realized that leadership does not require authority. It requires steadiness. Her voice had become steady enough to carry silence without discomfort. Silence had once felt like something to fill. Now it felt complete. She trusted herself deeply, not because she had all the answers, but because she knew how to listen inwardly. That trust guided her decisions effortlessly. Life still presented challenges. Uncertainty did not disappear, but uncertainty no longer unsettled her. She knew she could respond without abandoning herself. She stopped asking, "What will this cost me socially?" and started asking, "What will this cost me internally?" The second question changed everything. She noticed how often people confused strength with hardness. She knew better now. Strength could be gentle, strength could be quiet, strength could remain open. Her voice reflected that understanding. It spoke with warmth, with precision, with restraint. She no longer raised it to be heard. She trusted that it would be. And if it wasn't, she let that be information, not injury. Not every space is meant for your voice. Not every audience is ready. Readiness is not something you can force. She had learned to recognize belonging. It felt like ease, mutual respect, no performance. She built her life around those principles. Days unfolded naturally, some joyful, some reflective, all honest. She no longer rushed growth. Growth happened in its own time. She realized something profound. Her voice had not grown stronger because she spoke more. It had grown stronger because she stopped betraying it. Consistency had given it weight. Integrity had given it depth. Her age had not diminished her relevance. It had refined it.